Miguel tightly held Cayo's hand, his best friend, as the rhythmic sounds of the hospital machines filled the oppressive silence. The cold light of the room reflected on Cayo's pale face as he struggled to breathe. Miguel knew the end was near, but nothing could prepare him for losing someone who meant so much. Cayo was more than just a friend. He was like a brother. "Miguel," Cayo whispered with a weak voice, "I need to ask you a favor." His eyes locked onto Miguel's, filled with an urgency that frightened him. "Promise. Promise you'll take care of Ana and Pedro when I'm gone." Miguel's heart tightened. He knew how much Cayo loved his wife Ana and their young son Pedro, but the weight of that promise was overwhelming. Miguel felt a lump in his throat, the urge to refuse stuck in his mind, but Cayo's words were a final plea. I promise," Miguel replied, feeling the weight of the promise settle heavily on his shoulders. Cayo gave a faint smile, as if a burden had been lifted from his chest, and closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. The following days blurred with grief and goodbyes. At the funeral, Miguel stood by Ana's side, holding her hand as she sobbed. Pedro, too young to understand the enormity of the loss, clung to his mother's leg, seeking comfort in the midst of the absence. Miguel watched the scene, fully aware of the promise that lingered like a shadow over him. As the weeks passed, he began to fulfill his word. He frequently visited Ana, helping her with daily tasks that now felt overwhelming. There were bills to pay, small repairs around the house that Cayo hadn't been able to finish, and above all, there was an emptiness that no practical help could fill. Miguel did his best to be there, staying strong even when his own emotions weighed on him. Ana, still deep in grief, was grateful for Miguel's presence. She didn't ask for much, just someone to listen to her, to support her when the longing became unbearable. And Miguel was always there. He knew his presence was a constant reminder of the promise he had made at his friend's deathbed, and though it weighed on him, he remained committed to his purpose. Miguel's life began to intertwine with Ana's and Pedro's. He became a regular figure in their home, almost like a member of the family. The nights he spent in his own home became moments of silent reflection, where he wondered what the future held. He had made a promise and was determined to keep it, but he was starting to realize that the line between obligation and desire was becoming dangerously blurred. The days turned into weeks, and before long, Miguel couldn't imagine his life without the daily presence of Ana and Pedro. Cayo's promise guided him like a compass, but he feared that it was leading him into emotional depths he had never anticipated. Weeks became months, and Miguel grew to be an indispensable part of Ana and Pedro's lives. He didn't just help with everyday tasks. He was also there for the small, meaningful moments: Pedro's first school performance, the quiet dinners that gradually became more comforting, and the late-night conversations with Ana. Those moments felt comfortable, almost natural, yet carried a tension they both pretended not to notice. Miguel found himself in an internal conflict. The promise he made to Cayo drove him to stay by Ana's side, but he couldn't ignore the feelings that began to surface. When Pedro called him Uncle Miguel with an innocent smile, his heart filled with a joy he hadn't expected. He realized he wasn't just fulfilling a promise, he was becoming part of the family. Ana, in turn, started to open up to life again. The pain of her loss was still there, but Miguel's presence brought her a sense of security she had lost when Cayo passed away. She knew Miguel was there for her. Driven by the promise she made to her husband, Ana occasionally wondered if there was something more. The way Miguel looked at her, the care in every gesture, it held a tenderness that went beyond mere obligation. One evening after putting Pedro to bed, Miguel and Ana sat at the kitchen table. The conversation flowed naturally, as it often did now. They talked about Pedro and the daily challenges, but gradually the conversation shifted to memories of Cayo. There was a brief silence, and for a moment, they looked at each other with an intensity that surprised them both. Anna broke the gaze, nervously fidgeting with the teacup in front of her. "He always talked about you," she murmured, almost to herself. "He said you were the brother he never had, and now here you are, keeping the promise he asked for." Miguel swallowed hard. Anna's words were a reminder of the vow that kept him there, but also of the fine line he walked every day. "I made a promise," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady, "and I'm going to keep it." Anna nodded, but said nothing more. The silence that followed was heavy with everything they couldn't say. Both were aware of the feelings growing between them, but the shadow of Cayo and the promise Miguel had made hung over them like an insurmountable barrier. Over time, Miguel began to question himself. Was he there purely because of the promise? Miguel had made a promise to Cayo, but the truth was he wanted to be there. He wanted to help Anna, to watch Pedro grow. The bond that had developed between them was far deeper than he ever could have imagined, and each day that passed, he dreaded the moment when he would have to face those feelings. As the months went by, Miguel became more and more a part of Anna and Pedro's lives, yet he couldn't ignore the growing unease within him. One day, while searching for a tool in Cayo's garage, he stumbled upon a small wooden box hidden beneath a stack of old papers. Curiosity got the better of him, and he opened it, finding Cayo's journal inside. Miguel hesitated, knowing that reading it would mean delving into his friend's most private thoughts, but the urge to understand the weight of the promise he was carrying pushed him forward. He skimmed through the pages until he found an entry written a few weeks before Cayo's death. The words he read hit him like a punch to the stomach. "Miguel has always loved Anna, even if he's never said it, I know. He will protect her like I would, if I could. I will make sure he's there for her and Pedro." Miguel froze. Cayo had known, his friend had known about the feelings Miguel had kept hidden, feelings that even Miguel himself hadn't fully acknowledged. And more than that, Cayo had planned to use those feelings to ensure that Miguel would take care of his family. As Miguel read further, he discovered that Cayo, aware of his illness, Cayo, fully aware of his terminal illness, had orchestrated everything, even his own passing, to ensure that Miguel would fulfill the role he could no longer play. Miguel's mind spun with the revelation. He felt betrayed and manipulated. The promise he had made wasn't just the dying wish of a friend, but a carefully crafted plan. The burden he had been carrying in the name of friendship now felt like an emotional trap, designed to bind him to a life he hadn't chosen, but that had been imposed on him. The pain was overwhelming. Miguel distanced himself from Anna's home for a few days, trying to process everything he had read. The promise was real, but it was now clear it had been built on manipulation and control. He felt like everything was falling apart around him, and the only person who could help him make sense of it all was Anna. He knew he had to confront her, even though he feared what it might mean for both of them. When Miguel returned to Anna's house, his heart was weighed down by Cayo's words. He needed answers, not just about the promise, but about everything that had happened between them. Anna greeted him with a cautious smile, but it quickly faded as she noticed the troubled expression on his face. "We need to talk," Miguel said, his tone serious, wiping the smile from her face. Sitting in the living room, he pulled Cayo's journal from his bag and placed it on the table. "I found this," he began, watching her closely. Anna's reaction was one of shock and confusion as she stared at the journal. "I read what Cayo wrote about us," Miguel said, his voice heavy. Anna frowned, clearly not understanding what he meant. "What are you talking about, Miguel?" she asked, her tone laced with uncertainty. Miguel hesitated, but knew he had to be direct. "Cayo knew," he said finally. "He knew about my feelings for you even before he got sick. He planned all of this. Anna, the promise I made, He manipulated us to make sure I would take care of you and Pedro." Ana remained silent for a long moment, processing Miguel's words. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "Do you think I knew about this? That I was part of some plan of his?" There was a mixture of pain and anger in her eyes. Miguel shook his head, unsure of what to believe. "I don't know what to think, Ana. All I know is that I've been used. And you seem to accept my presence so easily, like you were expecting this." Ana stood up, tears forming in her eyes. "Do you think it was easy for me to lose Caio? To deal with everything alone and then have to accept help even when I didn't want it? Yes, I accepted your presence, Miguel. I accepted it because I needed someone, because Pedro needed someone. But that doesn't mean I was conspiring with Caio." The anger and pain were bubbling to the surface for both of them. Ana took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "What you don't understand, Miguel, is that Caio was desperate. He knew he was going to die, and she tried to do what she thought was right to protect us," Ana continued, her voice soft yet filled with emotion. "Yes, he manipulated you, and maybe even me, but he did it because he was scared. And I accepted it because I was scared too." Miguel felt a wave of confusion and guilt. He wanted to believe Ana was innocent, but the sting of betrayal was still fresh. His voice hoarse, he asked, "What do we do now, Ana?" She sat back down, her gaze fixed on him. "We decide what we want from here on, Miguel. Not what Caio wanted, but what we want. If you're here out of obligation, then leave. But if you're here because you truly want to be, then stay." A heavy silence followed. Miguel knew this was the moment of truth. The weight of Caio's promise had been lifted, and now he had to choose for himself what path to take. Miguel stepped away for a few days, needing time to sort through his thoughts and emotions, which now felt like a storm inside him. He replayed every moment he spent with Ana and Pedro, questioning himself about why he was there. Was it just the promise that bound him to them? Or was there something deeper, something he was afraid to admit? As Miguel reflected, the house felt empty without him. Ana felt his absence like a lingering echo, and Pedro asked about him every day. Each question struck Ana like a blow to her heart. She knew that all their futures hung in the balance, depending on the decision Miguel would ultimately make. Finally, Miguel came to a realization. He had avoided it for so long, but now the truth was undeniable. He wasn't just fulfilling a promise anymore. He had fallen in love with Ana, with Pedro, and with the family they had built together. Caio's manipulation had been a burden, yes, but now it was up to him to decide what to do with the feelings that were his own, not his late friend's. By the end of the week, Miguel returned to Ana's house. She greeted him at the door, her face reflecting a mixture of hope and apprehension. Pedro ran to him, hugging him as if everything was just like before. Miguel took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of Pedro's embrace, and realized what truly mattered. He looked at Ana, his eyes showing the determination he had finally found. "I made a promise to Caio," he began, his voice steady. "But today, I'm here by my own choice. Not because he wanted me to, but because I want to. I want to be with you, Ana, because I love you both." Ana felt tears welling up again, but this time they weren't tears of pain. She stepped forward and embraced Miguel, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. They held onto each other there in the hallway, finally free from the shadows of the past. Miguel knew that this decision wasn't the end of their challenges, but it was the start of a new path, a path he had chosen to walk alongside Ana and Pedro, not bound by manipulation, but guided by the genuine love that had grown between them. Now, the journey was theirs to build together. With the decision made, Miguel and Ana began to rebuild their lives, knowing full well that there would be challenges ahead. The challenges were far from over. The truth about Cayo's final months started to come to light as Miguel and Ana sorted through the documents he had left behind. They uncovered hidden debts and evidence of illegal activities. In his desperation to secure his family's future, Cayo had gotten involved with dangerous people. Miguel realized that Cayo's legacy was far more complicated than he had anticipated. The need to protect Ana and Pedro now took on a new meaning, clearing the family's name and keeping the looming threats at bay. Wasting no time, Miguel sought out a lawyer, and together they began to unravel the web of problems Cayo had left behind. The weeks that followed were intense. Miguel and Ana faced veiled threats from creditors, anonymous calls, and the constant fear that something terrible could happen. Pedro, unaware of the entire situation, was kept shielded from these dangers. But Ana lived in a state of constant alert. Miguel, for his part, became the family's pillar, determined to protect them at all costs. In one of the meetings with Cayo's creditors, Miguel confronted the men, demanding money with unwavering courage. He declared that he would not be intimidated and was prepared to face any legal consequences necessary to shield Ana and Pedro. It was a tense moment, but it was crucial for Miguel and Ana to show that they would no longer be controlled or threatened by the shadows of Cayo's past. They would no longer be controlled by Cayo's past decisions. Gradually, with legal assistance and a lot of effort, Miguel and Ana began to untangle the mess that Cayo had left behind. They sold some assets that Cayo had acquired through his illegal activities and used the funds to pay off debts. It was a painful but necessary process to regain the peace and security of their family. Each small victory was a significant achievement, symbolizing their release from the chains of the past. Miguel and Ana knew that remnants of Cayo's past would always linger in their lives, but they were determined to build a new future. They were no longer prisoners of a manipulated promise. They were architects of their own destiny. Nights returned to being peaceful, with Pedro laughing again, unaware of the struggles his parents had faced. That night, as Pedro slept, Miguel and Ana sat in the backyard under the starry sky, looking at each other and reflecting on what they had overcome together. Miguel took Ana's hand, a simple gesture filled with meaning. It was no longer an obligation, but a free choice. "We can finally breathe," Ana said in a calm voice, though Miguel detected a relief he hadn't heard before. "Yes," Miguel replied, pulling her closer. "Now it's just about us and what we want for the future." They stayed there, embraced under the stars, ready to move forward. Moving forward, Cayo's promise had been fulfilled, but now it was the promise of a new beginning that guided them. Months later, Miguel, Ana, and Pedro found a new normal. The house, once filled with mourning and uncertainty, now echoed with laughter and renewed hopes. The shadows of Cayo's past still lingered, but they had transformed into mere memories, no longer an unbearable burden. Miguel watched Pedro play in the garden, his heart warming at the sight of the boy's carefree joy. He reflected on everything that had transpired. The promise made to Cayo had been the starting point of a journey filled with conflicts and painful revelations. Yet from that promise emerged something unexpected, a family built on sincere lessons and true love. Ana approached and sat beside Miguel, intertwining her fingers with his. They both looked at Pedro, feeling a peace that had long evaded them. "What happened before brought us here," Ana said softly, as if summarizing the past few years in a single sentence. Miguel nodded. "Yes, and now it's about what we build together." He smiled, finally feeling free from the weight of the initial promise. With the past behind them, Miguel and Ana were ready to move forward side by side, guided by a future of their own choosing. If you enjoyed the story, please give it a like, share this video with a friend, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next exciting story.